Long ago, in a vast and beautiful land surrounded by tall mountains and shining rivers, there lived a mighty ruler named King Nadir. His kingdom was rich, his palace made of gold, and his soldiers strong and loyal. In the early years of his rule, King Nadir was wise and kind. He listened to his people, helped the poor, and ruled with justice. His name was respected in every corner of his land. But as time passed, pride and arrogance began to grow inside his heart. He looked at his grand palace, his treasures, and his army, and thought to himself, "No one can ever challenge me. I am the greatest ruler in the world." Slowly, the kind and just king turned into a cruel and greedy tyrant. He ordered new taxes on his people. The poor farmers were forced to give most of their crops to the palace. Merchants were made to pay heavy gold coins, and if someone failed to pay, they were beaten or thrown into prison. The king's soldiers went into villages, taking food and animals from poor families. Children cried from hunger while the king's halls echoed with laughter. King Nadir had become heartless. He would sit on his golden throne and enjoy great feasts while his people starved. Anyone who dared to speak against him was punished. Fear spread throughout the land. The once happy kingdom had turned into a kingdom of sorrow. One day, an old woman came to his palace. Her face was wrinkled, her clothes were torn, but her eyes were full of faith and courage. She bowed before the king and said softly, "Greater than, O King Nadir, fear Allah. Your people are crying from hunger. Your cruelty has brought pain to every home. Remember, no kingdom lasts forever. The throne you sit on today may fall tomorrow." The king frowned angrily and shouted, "Greater than, who dares to speak to me like this? I am the ruler of this land. I can do whatever I wish. No one can take my throne." The old woman wept and lifted her trembling hands toward the sky and prayed, "Greater than, O Allah, you are the greatest and the most just. Show this arrogant king your power and bring him to justice." The words of the old woman echoed in the royal hall, and that very night, the signs of Allah's anger began to appear. Dark clouds covered the sky, and thunder shook the land. The next day, the rivers began to dry up, and crops in the fields turned brown and lifeless. The cattle and animals fell sick. People came to the palace gates crying, begging for mercy, but the king ignored them. He laughed and said, "This is just bad weather. My kingdom will never fall." Weeks passed, and things grew worse. The markets were empty, the farmers had no food, and the poor began to die of hunger. The king's own soldiers started to grow weak. Even his ministers whispered against him, but he did not care. The gold in his treasury was running out, yet his heart was filled only with pride. One terrible night, a great storm struck the city. Lightning flashed across the dark sky, thunder roared like a lion, and the wind howled through the palace. The people screamed in fear as roofs broke and walls fell. The king ran to his balcony, terrified, and saw his golden palace shaking. A giant bolt of lightning struck one of the palace towers, setting it on fire. The king shouted, "Greater than, what is happening? Where are my guards? Where is my power now?" But no one came to help him. His guards had fled, his ministers had escaped, and his palace was falling apart. The man who once called himself the mightiest king now stood trembling and helpless before the power of Allah. The next morning, when the storm ended, the city lay in ruins. The people left their homes and wandered in search of food. The king tried to flee to the mountains with a few servants, but even they left him along the way. Hungry, tired, and weak, he walked alone through the land that once belonged to him. Everywhere he went, people turned away. The same villagers he had oppressed now refused to help him. His clothes were torn, his crown was gone, and he looked nothing like a king anymore, just a broken, lonely man. Finally, he fell to his knees on the dusty road and cried out, "Greater than, O Allah, forgive me. I was blinded by pride and power. I forgot that you alone are the King of all kings. I brought pain to my people and turned away from your truth. Please have mercy on me." But his prayer came too late. His time was over. King Nadir died there, not in his palace, not on his throne, but alone, in the same dust where his people once walked barefoot. When the news of his death spread across the kingdom, no one mourned. Instead, people thanked Allah for freeing them from the hands of a cruel ruler. Soon, A new king was chosen, a man known for his justice, kindness, and fear of Allah. Under his rule, the rivers began to flow again, the crops grew green, and the people smiled once more. Peace and happiness returned to the land. And the people never forgot the story of King Nadir, the man who thought his power would last forever but was destroyed by his own arrogance.